It's Radio Free 501c, the podcast of Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm Cecilia Sepp, your host. Welcome to Season 7. This week, we're welcoming back a returning guest, one of my favorites to talk with, Mike Bober. And he's here to talk with us about one of his favorite topics, Advocacy Writ Large. And he's going to drop some of his famous acronyms on us. It's Monday, August 25th, 2025. Welcome to episode 296. Hey everybody, it's Monday, August 25th. It's time for another episode of Radio Free 501c, brought to you by Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm your host, Cecilia Sepp. I'm the principal and founder of Rogue Tulips. I'm so glad you're here with us this week because now we're having a mini trend of returning guests as we approach fall. And I'm really pleased to welcome back Mike Bober, who's been on a couple times sharing his famous acronyms, and he has another one for us today. But before we jump into that, I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to our global audience. And thanks again for joining us. If you haven't subscribed or followed us yet on your favorite podcast service, please do so you don't miss any of these great episodes like this one today. So now let's get back to welcoming back Mike. Mike, welcome back. Would you like to say hello to the audience and tell us a little about yourself?
Hello, audience. Cecilia, thanks for having me back. I really appreciate it. I am a certified association executive who's been in the advocacy space for about 15 years. And prior to that, I got my start in politics. So I tend to approach a lot of the things that all of us do in the association world with something of a campaign mindset. And that tends to inform some of those acronyms that I've brought to you in the past.
That's great. And our broad topic today, and I know you're all like, what is this acronym? I need to hear it. But our actual broad topic is Advocacy Writ Large, because it is something all associations do and all nonprofits do, actually, because again, all 501cs are nonprofits. So we're all doing advocacy. So we're all doing that outreach. We're all representing our members or our stakeholders or the policy position that we're advocating on behalf of, whatever that may be, if you're a C4, for example. So,
Right.
Mike, what does advocacy writ large mean to you?
Well, there's a quote that I found a couple years ago. I do some of these presentations to students over at George Mason University, and the definition that I found for advocacy that I brought to them was quoted back to the Alliance for Justice. And they describe advocacy as any action that speaks in favor of, recommends, argues for a cause, supports or defends, or pleads on behalf of others. That's a whole lot of words to basically say, telling somebody's story to try to get something to happen.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great quote. And I think that covers the whole thing because, as you know, and many people who listen know, I do a lot of work with people getting ready to take the CAE exam, and advocacy is one of the domains of practice for our body of knowledge. And it's one of the things we discuss because it's not lobbying and it's not government relations only. It is that whole act of, like you just said, and boiled it down to getting your message out and representing those that you work with. And whether you are doing it as a volunteer or a staff person or a paid lobbyist, you're advocating because you are trying to make something happen. And as you and I talked about as we were preparing for the episode, I like to say associations are the world writ small because we are a microcosm.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And I would say that, when you really get down to it, advocacy is kind of woven through every element of what we as associations do. I mean, it really does boil down to just educating, sharing information, being that conduit between a subject matter expert and somebody who's engaged in the act of making policy.
And I love that, being the conduit, that is exactly what advocacy is. I love that. So that's actually a nice segue into this episode's acronym, I think. And I don't want to spoil your surprise, so I'm going to let you tell everybody what the acronym is.
Okay. Yeah. Well, anybody who's listened in the past knows that I like my sort of four F's and three P's and this, that, and the other. This time it actually spells a word. So I don't know if I'm getting better or worse. But what I like to say is that when it comes to associations, advocacy is a core function, and that's C.O.R.E. The first of those letters is C for challenge. Advocacy is a response to a challenge, whether that's the challenge of how to secure more funding to accomplish the things that you're trying to do, whether it's a challenge of misinformation that is leading to lawmakers having an incorrect understanding of your position, or whether it's just the challenge of making our way in this everyday world. The reality is advocacy is a response to that challenge. And so for an association, what it means to rise to that challenge is to be the voice for your membership, whether that's your individual members if you're a C6, whether that's the organizations or the companies that make up your membership base. Advocacy is all about responding to the challenges that they face. Now, challenge for a lot of us kind of implies struggle, difficulty, maybe has a slightly negative connotation. But the second letter in C.O.R.E. is O, and that stands for opportunity, because every single one of these challenges is also an opportunity. It's an opportunity to tell your story. It's an opportunity to recruit champions. It's an opportunity to empower your members to get involved in their own advocacy and to start to build those relationships that we all know are just so very important to be able to get anything done when it comes to the legislative process. And so for me, at least, and for most of the groups that I've worked with over time, the opportunity that advocacy presents really is kind of the upside of, or the sort of the other side of the coin of challenge.
Well, and I think I'm glad I can jump in here.
Yeah, I didn't want to just monologue.
Well, first of all, The Art of War by Sun Tzu, that's really the message from that book, is seeking out opportunities. You're
right.
Always looking for an opportunity. And when you consider it's written from a general's point of view, talking about battles and wars and how you make things happen, that's really good advice. A challenge is also an opportunity. And I agree with you. Challenges actually help us to be better, because if
Definitely.
we don't have something to work toward or something to overcome, we're just going to be the same. And
right.
we don't get that opportunity to improve or try something new or maybe learn something from a failure. So I love that. So, but I know everybody wants to know what R is for.
Well, you actually just teed it up perfectly, because as you said, the not doing anything is stagnation, and frankly, in the association world, it's poor leadership. And so the R of C.O.R.E. is that advocacy is also a responsibility. For those of us in the association world, it is absolutely our responsibility to approach things with foresight, to approach things with thought, and to rise to those challenges, to meet the questions that are being thrown at us, and in some cases not being asked, and to make sure that we are taking the lead and effectively making sure that our constituency is not being left behind, isn't getting complacent, isn't allowing other people to define the narrative for them. So I think, advocacy can be daunting for some people. I think it feels a little bit outside of the average association executive skill set. But sometimes it is an absolute necessity and a responsibility to step up and step forward and say, we're going to tell our story and we need your help, and we're going to work with you side by side on this, but we're going to make sure that our voice is being heard and we're not being defined by our absence.
Well, and I agree. Advocacy is everyone's responsibility. It's not just the board. It's not just the C-suite leadership on staff. Mm-hmm. It's all the members. Or maybe you're supporting a group, a 501c3, that's more of a social service sector
type
organization. All the people who support that group. We should be advocating on behalf of that mission because that's where it starts for everybody. And then E, I think, is a great tie-in
It
to
is.
advocacy.
That's right. Yeah. E stands for engagement. And as you said, for the organizations that we work with in the 501c space, that's for everybody from the top to the least engaged individual. The goal here is to make sure that not only they understand what you stand for, but they understand their role in communicating that to people who are outside the organization, especially decision makers like lawmakers and staff. When you can engage your grassroots, your individual members, and arm them with good, researched, data driven arguments, and then help them get comfortable with sharing those, that's going to have so much more of an impact when they go to their individual elected officials than hours upon hours of the professional staff in Washington kind of going to meeting after meeting for you. The goal of any good advocacy program is to build and foster and grow relationships so that when you need someone's help or when you need to get a message across, you already have that bridge of trust and you already have that relationship in place so that you're not coming to them as a stranger, but rather as somebody who is a trusted source for information.
And I think that we overlook that many times, that you have to have that relationship built over a long period of time, no matter what it is. So whether it's a decision maker at any level of government, or it's a donor, or it's somebody you're trying to recruit into membership, you need to be building that relationship before you make an ask. They need to understand why they should work with you.
Yeah, they always say that the time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's right. Although sometimes we don't have a choice. We have to fix it.
And that's the thing. And sometimes you have to be ready. Those are those challenges and the responsibility that you have to meet the challenge when it arises. You can't sit back and say, oh, well, we didn't do the prep work ahead of time, so I guess we're just going to sit this one out. Sometimes you have to be nimble. Sometimes you have to be willing to kind of go in, half prepped, but you need to be ready to get into the conversation. And to me, that's what advocacy is. It's an invitation to conversation. It's an opportunity to come to someone and say, I have information that I think you would benefit from. I think it would definitely inform your decision making. It's not, a lot of people like to think of lobbying as how to get what you want. It is, but it's more about how to get the other person to understand why you want what you want, and to then hopefully have them come around to see it your way as well.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Why you want what you want. I've been learning more about the 5 whys in lean
Ooh,
management
yes,
philosophy. And
excellent.
why? We always have to answer that. I know we
That's
probably
right.
all sound like a bunch of 2-year-olds, but
Well, as
uh,
as as a parent myself, I feel like understanding the motivations behind wants can sometimes go a long way toward making for a much more conducive conversation.
right. That is a good point. And I want to shift to a little bit different area of advocacy.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people when they're getting ready for the CAE exam, or maybe they're just having this argument, it seems to be an ongoing argument, that 501c3s cannot lobby.
Oh, not true. Not
And
true at
that's
all.
not true. Although I will say, and I know that, I will say what I do advise C3s to say though is you're advocating just
Hmm.
to protect yourself. But what are some of the guidelines for a C3 who wants to actually lobby, because they can with a lot of restriction?
That's a fair point, and I think we need to be very careful to start this conversation by saying that the best advice that you can get on this is from your own counsel,
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to have the better understanding of your risk posture. They're going to have the best understanding of your organization's founding documents. So, any advice that we share here is kind of general, sort of conceptual advice. But the answer is that if you are educating about a specific issue, if you're educating about factual materials, that can be advocacy without crossing the line into lobbying that would have you as an organization run afoul of your tax exempt status. The biggest distinction here is advocating for a cause, advocating for a subject, as opposed to advocating for the election or defeat of something, or the advocating for the passage of a specific piece of legislation. Anytime that you spend sharing information about what your organization stands for, that can absolutely be the kind of effective advocacy that any 501c organization can do without too much concern about crossing over. But again, it really then comes down to what you're saying, how you're saying it, to whom you're saying it, when you're saying it, how close to an election. There's a lot of those moving parts that I really do. I always try to avoid getting into too many, you absolutely can do this, you absolutely can't do that statements, because there are always edge cases that you don't want to put somebody in a bad place.
Right. Right. And I think, and I support wholeheartedly your advice about if you're not quite sure, talk to your general
Yeah, when in
counsel.
doubt. Yeah.
So, although there is a lot of good information on the IRS website, if
You're
you
right.
want to read more, learn more, which is great. But one of the things that I just say to people is just remember to educate, not ask.
That's right.
Because if you're just sharing information about what you do and why you do it and how it impacts the world around us, that's great, but you
You're
can't
generally
ask
safe.
them
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
do something like you can't say vote for this or don't vote for that sort of thing.
Exactly.
And so generally educate, don't ask is good advice for all of us.
Agreed.
And I think I'd like to get your input on this. And if you just say, yeah, you're right, that would be fine too. But on the C6 side, that might be a good approach too. Educate, don't ask until you need to ask. Don't be asking all the time.
Yeah, no, I would say that there's always the idea that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's also my least favorite wheel. So, I think there's a line to be walked between being a partner, a collaborator, a resource, versus somebody who's always coming in because they want something or need something. I don't know about you, but I'm always far more receptive to an ask from a friend who hasn't hit me up for something recently than the guy who's always coming up $5 short when we go out for drinks.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Although, my friends hardly ever have cash. So,
Good point.
it's like
These days everybody just sends it by Venmo, but
yeah,
still.
they're doing Venmo or they're like, give me your cash and I'll put it on my credit card. And it's like, okay, that's fine. Because we try to have options in our house. Like we have cash, we have credit card, we're good. We Venmo, we Zelle. So
but I do think you're right. I do think that for a 501c6, more of your advocacy time and effort should be spent educating than asking, because again, you really do need to lay that groundwork. You need to establish your bona fides as somebody who's a reliable source for valuable and well-sourced information. And the more you're doing that, the more you're building up your credibility for when those crises do arise.
Well, and Mike, I want to shift again to a little bit different topic.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of experience, many years of knowledge and relationship management advice from doing all the advocacy work. Do you have any tips for building coalitions and making them work well together?
That's a great question. And coalition building is absolutely part of advocacy. One of the things that I think we've all found over the years is that it's one thing to hear about an issue from somebody you expect to have an opinion on it, but when someone is a trusted source who speaks up on an issue that doesn't benefit them directly, sometimes that can carry even more weight. And so coalition building and finding those aligned but not necessarily affiliated voices, that is absolutely a skill set that any association or any 501c should really put some time and effort into. And I think the best way to go about doing it, I used to counsel candidates who were running for office that coalition building really boiled down to the old Sesame Street song, "Who are the people in your neighborhood?" And you need to do that. You need to sit down and think, who is it that makes up the community that's around me? And you start with the folks who are in your immediate field of vision. the people who are working side by side with you, who are in an affiliated field. And then you build outward from there. And you say, okay, well, I'm connected to this person because we're both regulated by the Department of Agriculture. But then they're related to this other person because they're both involved in Alaskan wildlife management. And suddenly you find yourself 2 and 3 degrees from your core mission, but you're still in a position where you're able to kind of agree to certain core principles that make those coalitions work.
Well, and I think that we do not use coalitions effectively enough.
It's really hard to do for an association because it's always somebody's second or third job. There
Right.
are very few associations that can afford to allocate full-time resources to coalition development.
Right. Well, that's true. But I think if it's an important enough issue, we need to find that.
Agree.
I hear this a lot, and maybe it's just because I've been in the profession for a really long time. But I hear this like, oh, we don't have the resources. We don't have the resources. And yet, whenever there's a crisis, we seem to find them.
We make the resources, yeah.
Yeah. So to your point about it's best to fix the roof when the sun is shining before
Yeah,
it starts raining, that's why I think coalitions are great ways to be ready to act when you
that's
need
true.
to. And I know that coalitions take time and that's staff resources,
Definitely.
but I think it's valuable. When I was a CSE in a long-term care association, I represented our association in several coalitions, and it was very worthwhile. It didn't cost a lot of money. It
Hmm.
cost time, but it was part of my job to go out and be part of these coalitions. And they don't all have to cost a lot of money. If you're just coming together, another example, one of the long-term care groups I represented us in was a long-term care leadership council, and it didn't
Mm,
cost us anything other than we would set meetings. So it cost us our time again, but
sure.
it was really a great way to build those relationships before we needed them. And then we would talk about ways we could share resources in the future and start
Hmm.
planning different things we could do. But the relationship was already there and we were already talking as a group. And I think that really makes a big difference.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it's time well spent to invest in coalitions.
Yeah.
Even just the force multiplier effect of bringing additional bodies and voices into a conversation is valuable. But when
Mhm.
you go to step beyond that and look at the leadership and the thought and the research that each group brings to the table, you find yourself in a situation where you're actually getting a lot more than you put into in terms of being part of it. Each of
Mhm.
you is bringing what you've got to the table. We always used to say that for any given coalition, there are 3 M's. People can bring money, messaging, or manpower strength. And if you look at what each of those bring to the table and try to quantify them relative to what it would cost you to go it alone as an organization, you very quickly realize that every hour, every dollar spent on coalition building has a huge return on investment.
I agree. And even if it's a short-term coalition on one
Definitely.
policy issue, years ago, I always kind of laugh when I remember it. I was more in policy and lobbying. And so I was the staff person for a group called the Alliance to Keep Americans Working. And it was a coalition of business trade associations that were trying to support the striker replacement bill to
Mm-hmm.
allow them to replace striking workers. And we did not win, but
Mm.
that was just a short-term coalition. And it was an interesting name, first of all, Alliance to Keep Americans Working, when we wanted to replace striking workers. So whatever you
Uh,
think
the,
about that. But was
the
also,
euphemisms in Washington are sometimes a matter of real enjoyment.
that's right. They're very entertaining, especially when you look back at some of them. They're
Definitely.
funny. But it was also funny because we took it as a win that we didn't lose by as much as we thought we would. So that's another DC thing.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah.
Sometimes framing the conditions for victory are a key part of what we do. You have to manage people's expect. I mean, you have to manage expectations. The
Right.
reality is that very few policy initiatives that are completely new pass the first time out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
And so managing people's expectations and helping them understand that incremental progress is still progress is really a very important part of what we do in the association world.
That's true. That's true because it is an important part, managing expectations and everything. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of a time are you going to have at the annual conference,
Yeah,
and what should you expect, and membership
definitely.
participation, engagement. It's important. And I think that's important for all of us and everything, is manage those expectations. What am I going to get if I buy this product or pay for this service? What am I going to get?
Yeah.
And I think that that's just as important in advocacy work. And before we wrap up, I mean, it's always fun talking with you, and you threw in a
Thank you.
bonus acronym of the three M's.
Oh yeah, no, it makes it easy.
Messaging,
It makes it
messaging,
easier
money,
for me to remember
manpower.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's if I can do them like that, then it's easier to kind of keep them top of mind when I need them.
Yeah, that's well, and I agree. I do a lot of that in the CAE course that I run to help people get ready for the test. I try to
Yeah,
think of short things that
yeah.
you
Acronyms and
remember.
mnemonics. Yeah, they're a huge way to help.
Well, and when you're in a high pressure situation, it's makes it much easier for you to find that data in your head
It's
that you put
sticky.
in that, but where
Yeah,
did I put it?
yeah, yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, I love it. One of the people in the course a few years ago started calling those Cecilia-isms,
Oh, good for
these
you.
little short things. So I was like, oh, okay. And she said she had a whole list of them. So I was like, oh, I didn't know I did that many. I thought I
You've
was
made
writing them
it.
down, but I should probably follow up and get the complete list, to finish the
Exactly.
book. But I think one of the things though, before we do wrap up, and maybe you'll throw in yet another bonus acronym. What is the difference really between advocacy and government relations?
Oh, I think the difference is that advocacy is something that is done through all aspects of a 501c's business.
Mhm.
We talked about it earlier. Advocacy is everything from how you interact with your members and how you engage your stakeholders to the government relations part, which is being the liaison for your organization or your industry or your constituency to federal agencies, engaging in the federal rulemaking process, talking about legislation. So I would say that to me, at least, advocacy is the umbrella, and government relations is one of the elements of it, one of the ribs of the umbrella, if you will. It's the difference between a strategy and a tactic. Advocacy is absolutely a strategy, and it's a necessary strategy for 501c's. Government relations is one of the tactics by which you act out your advocacy strategy.
Oh, I like that. That is a great explanation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I borrow that?
All yours, all yours.
Thank you. I
And
will give you credit.
you mentioned Sun Tzu earlier, and I think he actually has a statement on this concept as well. I believe that it goes something to the effect of uh, strategy without tactics is the slowest path to victory, but tactics without strategy is the clanging horns before the war, before failure.
Yes, yes, exactly. I usually see the quote as tactics are the noise before defeat.
That's what it is. There it is. Yeah.
So yeah, but it depends on which translation you read too. I have several
Well,
copies of The Art of War, and I have one that's from the early 20th century, and in the language is much different than the more modern version
yeah.
I have. So, but no,
Well,
Sun Tzu chock full of good advice, and
big fan. Big fan.
yeah,
Always encourage new executives to pick up the Art of War and read it. Not so much from that, macho militaristic standpoint, but
mhm,
more from the philosophical underpinnings.
yeah. I agree. That's why I find it so valuable. But
Yeah.
it's not about the war part. Although I did watch a documentary about the art of war a few years ago, and they had some docudrama sections, and
Oh,
some of the stuff he did was, pretty brutal
sure.
by our standards because that was the world they lived in. But
Yeah.
the philosophical underpinnings about relationship management, seeking out opportunities, intelligence gathering, Those are all things we can all use today, and they're presented in that way. We're trying to build a better relationship. We're trying to get information to make better decisions. We're trying to get there first.
Yeah, yeah. And, for me, coming to advocacy and to the association world from the political world,
Mhm,
it really is kind of that campaign mindset.
mhm.
If you're going in thinking about things from the idea of, what is the strategy, what is the opposition I'm likely to engage, it definitely does have a lot of applicability.
Wow. Well, this has been a great conversation as always. And again,
They always are. Yeah.
yeah, you'll definitely be back.
Thank you.
And especially appreciate the bonus acronym MMM. I'm going to remember
Yeah.
that one, the
I'm
three
I'm I'm
M's.
giving you all of my acronyms and mnemonics.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I love it. Thank you. Because I love those things. They just make it so much easier. Our heads get full of so much knowledge and
Yeah.
information. It's hard to find it. And so AI is really not smarter than us. It's just not distracted.
It's quicker. Yeah.
Yeah. It has that extreme focus
Yeah.
that we can't have because it's not thinking about feeding the dog and what is on the grocery list.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, this is great. Now, as you know, you've been on before, you'll be on again, as you
I
know.
will.
Uh, what is the one thought you would like the audience to take away today? And then how can people get in touch with you if they'd like to follow up with you?
Excellent questions. I think the one thought that I want everybody to kind of take away with them today really is that idea that advocacy is something that needs to be woven through everything that you do, because whether you realize it or not, everything you're doing is advocacy. And so if you go to it with a little bit more intention and a little bit more planning ahead, you're more likely to get the outcomes you're looking for. And then as far as if people want to get in touch with me, you can find me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is MF Bober. So that's Michael Frank. And otherwise, if you need to get a hold of me, I am generally found out and about in Washington, D.C., and I'm usually hard to miss.
Well, that is a great closing thought. Thank you for joining me again.
My pleasure. I look forward to the next time.
Well, we have to go rogue for now, but we'll be back next week actually, we won't be back next week because we're coming up on, I'm sorry, the week after this is Labor Day. So we won't be having a new episode that day, but we'll be back in September with another new episode. So again, don't forget to subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcast service. We're on all of them, so we're easy to find. If you'd like to find this episode featuring Mike Bober and share it with your friends and colleagues, you can find it on our podcast page at roguetulips.com. You can also learn more about our education program if you're getting ready for the CAE exam or looking for ethics education on our education page. And you can find out what I'm thinking about this week and what is on my mind and who knows what the heck she's going to say this week on our blog page. So we try to make it very easy to find everything. Again, go to our website if you would like to check out what we can do to work with you and help your organization bloom outside the box. Check out the services page and let's have a conversation. So on behalf of Mike and myself, thanks for joining us and we'll see you next time. That's it for this week. I hope you really loved this episode as much as I did. Thanks for listening. Learn more about how our experience and knowledge at Rogue Tulips can give your organization the strategic edge to reach its goals. Check out our website at roguetulips.com. We'd love to talk with you and see how we can work together. Thanks.